Most people imagine opening the Bible and finding one lonely God sitting in perfect celestial silence. Instead, you crack the door and walk into what feels disturbingly like a divine staff meeting already in progress. There are other beings in the room, they have opinions, and nobody seems especially eager to stop and explain this to you. Hey guys, tonight we begin with the Bible you thought you knew, and the very crowded heavens hiding in plain sight. We're going to step into the dark temple air, hear a priest chant words that sound far stranger than the softened versions you may have met, and stand in a world where the sky is not empty but populated. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in ancient Jerusalem. The good news, you are very much alive. The bad news, you are sleeping near oil smoke, old wool, and enough stale human breath to season a stew. It is night, but nobody in this city gets the luxury of modern darkness. Darkness now has texture. It presses against the walls, sits in the corners, and smells faintly of soot, damp stone, and animal leftovers. You sit up too fast and immediately regret having a spine. Your bedding is a thin arrangement of woven fibers and disappointment. It has collected dust, body heat, and possibly a small insect civilization with a functioning government. Your mouth tastes like old copper. Your hair smells like smoke because everything smells like smoke. Even the clean things smell pre-smoked, as though the entire city has been lightly barbecued for centuries. Outside, sandals scrape stone. Somewhere, a donkey gives a complaint, so dramatic it sounds personal. A child coughs. A dog starts barking at absolutely nothing, which, to be fair, in this world could still be something. You pull on your outer garment, stiff at the collar with dried sweat. Lovely. Ancient laundry technology has not yet reached the point of fresh. The lane outside is narrow and uneven, a charming ankle-testing obstacle course of loose dirt, broken pottery, and things you do not inspect too closely in the dark. Your feet know better. The street has the general hygiene standards of a festival parking lot after rain. The air is cool, but it carries that city bouquet no expensive candle has ever dared to reproduce. Ash, tallow, goat, human bodies, whetstone, and one mysterious sour note that suggests somebody nearby is losing a battle with grain storage. Ahead, the temple rises above the sleeping roofs. Even in the dark, it pulls the eye. Big walls, heavy gates, firelight trembling where it shouldn't be this late, because ritual does not keep office hours. You are not alone on the climb. A few other figures move upward in silence, wrapped in cloaks, heads lowered. Nobody is chatty. This is not a social brunch situation. At the entrance, the lamps burn low and greasy. The smell hits first. Hot oil, singed hair, old blood baked into stone. Incense trying heroically to cover all of it and managing only partial success. It is the scent of holiness, apparently. Holiness in practice smells like butcher shop perfume. Inside, shadows twitch along the walls. Gold catches the lamplight in little flashes, then disappears again. Priests move through the gloom with the brisk, exhausted air of men who have done this 10,000 times and still do not trust anyone else to do it right. Their linen garments look impressive from a distance. Up close, less so. Sweat has happened. Ash has happened. Life has happened. You take your place among the others and try not to stare too obviously, but of course you stare. Everyone does. In this room, every sound matters. A bowl clinks, a sandal scuffs. Someone clears his throat with the reverence of a man trying not to cough in front of God. Then the chanting begins. Not loud at first, just a voice cutting through smoke, roughened by years of repetition, speaking words you were not prepared to hear. Not because they are obscure, because they are far too blunt. You expected grand simplicity. One throne, one ruler, clean lines, nice theology. Instead, the words open like a door into a crowded chamber. The priest is not speaking as though heaven is empty except for one dazzling figure. He is speaking as though there are others up there, others with rank, others with jobs, others who stand in an assembly while the High One presides. And suddenly you are listening very carefully, because this does not sound like all those fake gods over there. It sounds like a room full of real beings, dangerous beings, glorious beings, the sort of beings that do not fit on a felt board beside a smiling sun. The chant rolls on, low and rhythmic. Names and titles move past in the smoke. Lord, Most High, Sons, Assembly, Gods, Gods. There it is again, sitting in the air like a dropped plate. Nobody around you gasps. Nobody drops dead from theological shock. An old man near the pillar adjusts his shawl. A woman shifts a sleeping child higher on her shoulder. The priest keeps chanting as though this is perfectly normal, because to everyone here, it is. You are the only one having a quiet internal crisis. Your modern brain, bless it, tries to mop this up immediately. Maybe they mean angels. Maybe it's symbolic. Maybe everyone is being poetic and inconvenient at the same time. But the room does not feel symbolic. The room feels occupied. The smoke thickens as incense is thrown onto coals. Sweet, resinous, choking. It crawls into your throat and behind your eyes. You blink tears away and peer deeper into the sanctuary, where light wavers on polished surfaces and darkness pools just beyond it. This is where heaven and earth are supposed to meet. Not in a tidy stained glass way, in a dangerous way. In a way that suggests the ceiling is less a barrier than a curtain, and behind that curtain there are chairs. A lot of chairs. You can almost picture it now because the language keeps nudging you there. A throne at the center, figures standing nearby, messengers coming and going, attendants waiting for instruction. Not a lonely king in an empty hall, but a ruler in a court. A court, of course, because ancient people never did anything without turning it into administration. Even the divine realm has bureaucracy. Somewhere in the heavens, apparently, there is a cosmic version of staff seating. The priest lifts his voice, and the syllables strike the stone walls hard enough to feel physical. The sound vibrates in your chest. You are not merely hearing a belief, you are standing inside it. And this belief is weirder than the tidy versions you may have inherited. These people do not seem embarrassed by a populated heaven. They are not rushing to explain it away. They pray upward into a world alive with terrible hierarchy, where the Most High rules, but other powers are very much part of the furniture. That is the part that really gets you. Not that ancient people imagined a divine world. Of course they did. It's that they imagined it crowded, ranked, noisy, and official. Like a palace, like a courtroom, like a royal council meeting where everyone has shown up in flame, wings, or whatever unsettling form they normally wear. The chant slows. A lamp sputters. Somewhere behind the veil, metal rings softly against metal. You stand there in the smoke, eyes watering, skin cool in the night air beyond the doorway, and realize tonight is not going to be about the verses embroidered on pillows. Tonight, you are opening the door to the passages that still smell like the old world. The ones with extra thrones. The ones with divine sons and heavenly assemblies. The ones where God does not appear alone, but enthroned among other beings so openly that you almost want to look around and ask, did nobody think this deserved a footnote? But no one here would understand the question. To them, this is just the universe. Heaven is not empty, it is staffed. And before this night is over, you are going to hear the words the way they land in this room. Without the smoothing, without the deodorizing, without anybody quietly replacing the weird bits with safer furniture. Tonight, we read the verses they do not put on greeting cards. The smoke has barely cleared your throat before the floor drops out from under your imagination. You are not in the temple anymore. You are somewhere much older. The room is enormous, but not empty. Empty would be comforting. Empty would be manageable. This place is crowded in the way a throne room is crowded when everyone important has arrived early and nobody bothered to warn the intern. Light comes from no obvious source, which is rude. It just exists, pouring over steps and pillars and something like polished stone under your feet. The air feels thin and sharp, like standing on a mountain during a storm, except there is no mountain and the storm appears to have learned etiquette. At the center is a throne. Of course there is a throne. Not a cute chair, not a tasteful accent piece. A throne with presence. A throne that makes every other seat in the room look like folding furniture dragged out for a budget banquet. And around it, arranged in ranks, are more seats. Occupied. This is the part no one embroidered on a throw pillow. You were prepared, maybe, for one blazing divine figure and a lot of respectful silence. Instead, you have walked into what feels alarmingly like the government wing of heaven. There are attendants standing ready. There are figures waiting to speak. There are beings whose entire posture says they have portfolios, responsibilities, and probably very strong opinions about regional oversight. You look around, and the old word for this place lands hard. Council, assembly, a gathering with order to it, not chaos, not mythic soup, not random glitter flying everywhere. A council, the heavenly version of a board meeting, except every board member could melt your face. You hear the word in the room like a struck bell, Elohim, and then you hear it again. Sometimes the word points to the Most High on the central throne. Sometimes it lands in the plural. Your modern brain immediately slips on the wet floor. Because yes, that same word can hold the singular greatness of God and also the category of divine beings around him. It is not tidy. Ancient people did not care about your tidy. They built whole worldviews out of things that would make a modern study Bible cough nervously into its notes section. You stand there trying not to look like someone who has entered the wrong meeting room. Around you are the sons of God, the Bene Elohim, and the phrase lands with less metaphor than you were hoping. These are not cherubic babies. No one here has dimples. These are members of the household of heaven, divine offspring, court officials, celestial staff with terrifying cheekbones and job descriptions you would not want on your LinkedIn. Some are bright, some are terrible, Some are so still they make statues look fidgety. Some carry the air of military officers. Some feel like witnesses. Some look as though they spend their days delivering messages that ruin kings' afternoons. And in the middle of them all, the throne. Authority radiates from it so hard, your knees want to file a complaint. Nobody needs to announce who rules this room. You know it instantly. Every other being in the chamber knows it too. Their glory is real, but it is borrowed. Their rank matters, but only because it was given. This is not a democracy. This is not a spiritual co-op. This is hierarchy with lightning. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. The room is not silent. It hums with voices, movement, report, response. You can feel business being conducted. Somewhere to your left, one of the heavenly ones steps forward, receives instruction, and vanishes with the efficiency of a courier who has done this all before. To your right, another waits with the stiff patience of someone hoping this meeting ends before eternity. The shape of it hits you all at once. Not just a deity, a court. The Most High stands in the divine assembly. He judges among the gods. There it is, plain as a sandal slap. You can dress it up later if you want. You can soften it, perfume it, hand it a respectable cardigan. But standing here, in the middle of this blazing bureaucracy, you are out of safe excuses. There are gods in the room, and the God at the center is addressing them like subordinates. The whole thing feels less like abstract theology and more like being trapped inside the strangest royal meeting of all time. Think palace protocol, but with thunder. Think cabinet session, but every minister is immortal and at least one of them probably has wings made of fire. A movement near the throne draws your eye. A messenger steps forward with the quick, practiced deference of someone used to crossing impossible distances in a single command. Another bows low enough that his forehead nearly touches the shining floor. There is rank here, order, access levels. Not everybody stands equally close. Of course not. Heaven, like every ancient court, loves a seating chart. The titles almost hang over their heads. Princes, messengers, accusers, watchers, holy ones, hosts, sons, hosts especially, armies, multitudes. The armies of heaven are not a poetic flourish here. They feel like an actual force. You hear armor somewhere beyond the visible ranks, a metallic whisper like blades shifting against one another. So much for fluffy cloud minimalism. This place has logistics. And then, as though to make things even stranger, the scene shifts. You are standing now in another throne room, one with the heat of prophecy on it. Down below, kings are panicking. On earth, a ruler wants advice he will not enjoy. Up here, the answer is already in committee. You see the Lord seated on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him, on his right and on his left. Not symbolic corners, positions. You are watching a ruler hold court with the host of heaven, standing in attendance like royal staff before the start of a dangerous assignment. The atmosphere has changed from temple mystery to war room. Plans are being discussed. Outcomes are being weighed. No one here looks confused. One question rolls out into the chamber. Who will persuade the king? You wait for a lightning bolt, a voice from nowhere, maybe a single immediate answer. Instead, the room starts talking. Of course it does. One says one thing, another says another. There is discussion, proposals, suggestions. It is a heavenly strategy meeting. And somehow, no one in your childhood Sunday school art ever thought to include this part. Probably because a picture of God chairing a celestial brainstorming session does not fit neatly on a coloring page. You can almost hear the overlap of voices now. Low, urgent, sharp. Not chaos exactly, but the kind of controlled noise a court makes when many minds are in motion at once. A spirit steps forward. That phrase alone should make your eyebrows leave your face. A spirit steps forward into the center of the council and offers a plan. You can feel all attention shift. The proposal is ugly, effective, and approved. Go. The command comes. Just like that, an assignment is handed down and a kingdom's fate starts moving. You stand there stunned because this is not the lonely throne of later imagination. This is a ruler among attendants, hearing proposals and issuing decisions. Supreme, yes. Unchallenged, yes. Alone, no. Heaven has staff, and not just ceremonial staff either. These are not decorative interns holding scrolls for ambiance. These beings do things. They carry messages, execute judgments, patrol, accuse, praise, guard, destroy, announce, and apparently participate in strategy sessions that can end dynasties. No wonder the old world felt crowded. When people looked up, they did not imagine a clean blue emptiness with one distant god floating somewhere, beyond the stars. They imagined layers, ranks, territories, powers. The sky had administration, forms, ranks, probably dreadful meetings. And then the floor shifts again, and you are somewhere colder. The mood in this next scene is less royal spectacle and more uncomfortable office arrival. The kind where everyone is already seated when the door opens and one particular employee strolls in like he knows exactly where the coffee is kept. The sons of God come to present themselves before the Lord. Present themselves. Report in. You can almost smell the room from the tension alone, though heaven itself smells less like old blood and more like ozone, hot metal, and the sharp, clean edge before rain. The beings gather, each in his place, and there is structure to the moment. Attendance is being taken in a cosmic key, and among them comes the accuser. Not slithering out of a cave, not blasting heavy metal from a smoke machine. He arrives like a prosecutor walking into court with a satchel full of allegations and absolutely no social anxiety. He belongs here. That is the unnerving part. He is not breaking in. He is not hiding behind a pillar. Nobody tackles him. No alarm trumpets sound. He walks in with the sons of God because this, apparently, is his lane. His title is a role before it becomes a villain name. The accuser, the adversary, the prosecuting attorney of the heavenly court. It is deeply inconvenient for later cartoon versions. You were probably expecting a rebel prince with lava under his feet and a pointy tail maintained by several overworked demons. Instead, you get what feels disturbingly like a celestial investigator, a man from compliance, but terrifying. Where have you come from? From roaming the earth, he answers. Not from hell, not from a flaming basement office full of pitchfork inventory problems. From the earth, walking up and down in it, like an auditor returning from a field inspection, dust on his sandals and notes ready. You can feel the whole room paying attention now. The exchange is calm, almost professional, which somehow makes it creepier. Casual evil is one thing. Formal procedure is worse, because the accuser is not here to cackle. He's here to make a case. And the case, as it turns out, is about a man down below whose life is about to become a cautionary tale with absolutely terrible customer service. The accuser challenges the integrity of Job's loyalty. Is this man righteous for nothing? Remove the hedge, remove the comfort, and watch what happens. This is courtroom language wearing dust from the human world. The room does not gasp. Nobody says, "Wow, that escalated." This is the business of heaven as the scene presents it. A prosecutor raises a challenge. Permission is discussed. Limits are set. You can feel the horror of it, because Job, poor man, is nowhere in this chamber. He is down on earth, probably trying to eat dinner, completely unaware that his name has just come up in the worst meeting imaginable. There should be a policy against this. There is not. The permission goes out, but with boundaries. You can touch what is his. You cannot touch him. Later, even that line moves, but only so far. The whole exchange has the terrible orderliness of a legal proceeding. That is what unsettles you. The accuser is not chaos. He is function. He is part of the machinery, not the king, not equal, not free to do whatever he wants, but not some outside invader either. He appears in the room the way a district attorney appears in a courthouse. Grim, necessary to the structure, universally unwelcome at parties. You watch him leave to do his work, and suddenly the word Satan feels less like a proper name and more like a badge clipped to a belt. The adversary, the accuser, the one whose whole existence is built around testing, challenging, exposing, pressing where things hurt. Every workplace has one. Heaven's is just more flammable. And that is only the beginning, because when the meeting reconvenes, he comes back, again with the sons of God, again like he belongs. Job's sores are waiting on earth. His skin will split, his sleep will vanish, his friends will become the kind of comforters who should be reviewed by human resources. But up here, the proceedings continue with the same chilling normality. The prosecutor reports in. The question is asked. The challenge is renewed. You start to understand why these old scenes feel so strange. They are not trying to flatter your categories. They are showing you a heavenly court where roles exist, responsibilities exist, and even the unsettling figures have office space. Now the scene changes once more, and the strangeness goes incandescent. You are in the year a king died. Earthly politics are shaking downstairs, but up here the threshold is already vibrating. You look and see the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, and the hem of his robe fills the temple. The hem, just the trailing edge of the garment, fills the place. That is not a robe. That is a territorial event. Smoke billows. Foundations shake. The room is no longer a measured court so much as a live detonation of holiness. Above the throne stand seraphim. Stand is generous. Hover, blaze, terrify. Each has 6 wings. With 2 they cover their face. With 2 they cover their feet. With 2 they fly. They call to one another across the chamber, and their voices hit the architecture so hard the doorposts shudder. You try to maintain dignity while the building rattles like cheap cutlery in a drawer. These are not Renaissance babies with tasteful feathers. These are throne attendants so overwhelming that even they cover themselves in the presence of the one on the throne. Their name burns. Their whole existence feels hot enough to sterilize a city. You hear them cry holy back and forth, and the sound is not gentle. It is not a soothing choir number under twinkling stars. It is closer to standing beside jet engines if jet engines were worshipping. Your chest vibrates. Your teeth might. The smoke gets into everything. Not the greasy temple smoke from below, with old fat and singed wool mixed in. This is cleaner and stranger, like cedar and stormfire and air after lightning smashed a tree open. It still catches in your throat. Heaven, apparently, remains committed to atmosphere over comfort. The throne room is so full of power that one human glimpse of it produces immediate collapse. "Woe to me," comes the cry, because what else are you going to say when your eyes land on a court like this? Nice decor? No. You fall apart. And even here, even in this overwhelming scene, the heavenly court is populated. There are attendants. There is movement. There is speech across the throne room. There is a mission needing a messenger. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? For us. There it is again, casual as a dropped knife. Not because the throne is sharing authority equally. It is not. The center remains the center. But the language once more places the speaker in a populated court, a ruling presence surrounded by a real heavenly retinue. You are in a room with God and the beings around God, and the whole thing feels less like abstract monotheism and more like the blazing headquarters of the universe. No wonder people came out of these encounters wrecked. No wonder knees gave out. No wonder prophets needed one of the fiery attendants to fly over with a coal, because after seeing this place, frankly, you would need a moment too. The coal hisses, flesh recoils, commission is given. A human is sent out from the divine council, carrying words that will bruise nations. The pattern is suddenly obvious in the only way that matters, not because anyone labels it for you, but because you have now stood in room after room and watched it happen. The Most High enthroned, the heavenly host present, the sons of God reporting, spirits proposing, attendants burning, assignments issued, judgments delivered, messages carried down to mud and blood and frightened kings. This is the throne room you were never told about. Not because it was hidden in some secret cave with a password and a torch puzzle. It was sitting there in plain sight the whole time, like a deeply inconvenient family heirloom everyone kept shoving into the back closet whenever guests came over. You can feel the old Hebrew terms like furniture in the room now. Elohim, not always solitary in the way you expected. B'nai Elohim, the sons of God presenting themselves in formal array. Sod, the council, the intimate assembly where the ruler's decisions are heard and his will goes out. These are not abstract dictionary entries here. They are the architecture of heaven. And standing in the middle of it, your nice, clean mental picture of a bare celestial throne with nothing around it but harp music has collapsed like a badly fired clay jar. Because heaven, in these scenes, is administrative, hierarchical, alive with rank and role. It is a palace, a courtroom, a war room, and a temple all at once. It is beautiful in a way that ruins you, and official in a way that somehow makes it weirder. That is what gets under your skin, the matter-of-factness of it. No one in these scenes pauses to explain why there are many beings around the throne. No one hands you a pamphlet. No one says, "Now don't panic, these other gods are just honorary interns." The room simply is what it is, crowded, structured, terrible, holy. And from this room, decisions fall into history like stones into water. Kings rise and stumble. Prophets speak. A righteous man sits in ashes scraping his skin with pottery shards because a prosecutor in heaven raised a case. Nations lurch toward judgment because a spirit volunteered for one grim assignment. A trembling human gets sent out with burning lips because the throne room needed a messenger. Down on earth, people are trying to bake bread, patch sandals, survive drought, and keep goats from eating absolutely everything. Up here, the universe has meetings, and you are still standing in one. The beings around you shift like stars taking orders. A voice rolls from the throne, and distance itself seems to obey. The seraphim cry out again. Somewhere behind the first ranks of attendants, more figures stand in readiness, the host of heaven stretching outward farther than your eyes can manage. Not one lonely god, a king in council, a ruler among the gods, a throne with witnesses, servants, officers, and sons. The Bible's heavens, at least here, are not an empty blue waiting room. They are full, uncomfortably full, and before long, one particular meeting is going to turn very ugly indeed. Because in this crowded chamber, among these divine seats and blazing attendants, there comes a day when the ruler stands up, looks at the gods themselves, and starts handing down sentence. But there's one meeting of the council that changes everything. And it's only 8 verses long. You would think something this catastrophic would take at least a chapter and a half. Maybe some trumpets, maybe a formal introduction, a clerk with a scroll, a heavenly bailiff yelling for everyone to rise. Instead, the whole thing lands fast, sharp, and merciless. You are still in the council chamber. The seats are full. The light is hard and clean enough to make every edge look judgmental. Pillars rise into brightness you cannot quite track. The floor under your feet gleams like polished stone after a rainstorm, except nothing here has ever known mud. Around the room, the gods are in their places, ranked and radiant and probably very confident in the way middle management always is, right before the audit begins. Then the Most High stands. The room changes instantly. Nobody has to announce it. No herald clears his throat. No one whispers, "Okay, this seems serious." Every presence in the chamber tightens at once. Because when the one at the center rises in the middle of the assembly, this is not for ambiance. This is court. You feel it in your ribs before you understand it with your mind. The air seems to pull inward. Sound narrows. Even the brightness of the room feels less like light now and more like attention. God takes his place in the assembly of God. Yes, that line. Not in a lonely sky, not on a private cloud with some tasteful harp music. In the assembly, in the middle of the gathered divine beings, and among the gods he judges. There is no way to make that sentence less dramatic without basically putting a cardigan on a thunderstorm. You look around the chamber. These are not statues, not metaphors with cheekbones, not decorative spiritual wallpaper. These are the divine ones, the sons of the Most High, the beings assigned authority, nations, oversight, responsibility, the heavenly administrators, the regional governors of the ancient world, except their performance review is taking place before the source of all authority, and nobody is leaving with a fruit basket. The defendants do not speak. That is the first chilling detail. No interruptions, no objections, no polished defense statement beginning with respect, Your Majesty, the situation on the ground is very complex." Nothing like that. They stand in silence as the accusation comes down. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? That line does not drift into the room. It hits. You can almost hear it strike the pillars and come back. How long? Not did you make an error. Not was there a misunderstanding. How long? This has been going on for a while. You feel the age of it all at once. Generations below. Kingdom after kingdom. Farmers buried in debt. Widows pushed aside. Children hungry enough to stop crying because crying costs energy. Judges taking bribes with greasy fingers. kings feasting while villagers cough through dust and empty grain jars. And over all of it, these gods had charge. You start to understand the shape of the complaint. This is not about incense quality, not about minor ritual paperwork. This is not a heavenly memo regarding robe violations. This is corruption, cosmic corruption, the kind that trickles down until human beings live with their knees in the mud while powerful beings sit comfortably above them. The divine council was supposed to govern the nations. Instead, apparently, they have been doing the ancient equivalent of collecting salaries while the whole department burns. And now, we arrive at the part nobody talks about. The charges are specific. Give justice to the weak and the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. One command after another falls into the chamber like hammer blows. You can feel the human world underneath every line. This is not abstract morality floating around in perfumed heaven. This is ground-level suffering, dirt under the nails, empty bellies, a mother trying to stretch flour that is already half dust, a boy standing outside a city gate while powerful men discuss his dead father's land as though he is not even there, an old man bent over with hunger, a laborer cheated of wages by someone with seals, servants, and a face like spoiled yogurt. That is what the gods are being accused of ignoring. You can almost smell the earth from here. Dry fields, sweat-soaked linen, sheep manure, open drains, bread baked from coarse flour and desperation. The people below are not living in stained glass illustrations. They are surviving in houses that smell like smoke, mildew, and whatever the goat got into yesterday. And these beings, entrusted with the nations, let wickedness run wild. The indictment keeps going. They have neither knowledge nor understanding. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaken. That last part lands like the room itself just cracked. Because this is bigger than individual cruelty, bigger than a bad harvest or one vicious king. The foundations are shaken, the supports, the load-bearing beams of the world. Justice, order, protection, proper rule, all of it wobbling because those assigned to uphold it have turned out to be useless, corrupt, asleep at the switch, or all three. It is the cosmic version of discovering your building inspector, your fire marshal, and your emergency management director have all been accepting gift baskets from arsonists. No wonder everything is on fire. You look down, almost instinctively, as if you might see through the heavenly floor into the nations below. And maybe you do, in flashes. Cities packed tight behind walls that trap heat and smell. Courtyards with cracked cisterns, palaces with polished ivory, while outside the gate someone is selling the family cloak to buy grain. Battlefields littered with bodies bloating in the sun, slaves hauling stones, prisoners kneeling in dust with ropes burning their wrists raw. This is what injustice looks like in the ancient world. Not an interesting debate topic. A widow with no roof patching a leak using reeds and prayer. A child with flies at the corners of his eyes. A village elder pretending there will be enough food if everyone takes less. The rulers below are guilty, yes. The human kings are often a complete disaster in a crown. But up here, the charge reaches beyond them. The gods who were supposed to govern, restrain, protect, and judge have failed at the very thing they existed to do. And the Most High is not in a forgiving mood. You hear the sentence begin with a line so startling it almost feels gentle at first. I said, "You are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you." There it is again, spoken openly, in the courtroom. No scrambling, no verbal air freshener. No one rushes in with a revised translation and a reassuring smile. You are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. The room must have been holding that identity like a title, a rank, a privilege, a formal recognition of office. These are real members of the heavenly court, given real authority beneath the supreme rule of the one who stands above them. And for one suspended moment, you wonder if maybe this is about to become a warning. A reprimand, perhaps. A stern memo. A probationary period with mandatory retraining. Absolutely not. Nevertheless, you shall die like mortals and fall like any prince. The whole chamber seems to go cold. That is the sentence. Death. Not metaphorical inconvenience. Not demotion to a smaller office. Not a heavenly pension package with reduced responsibilities and a quiet relocation somewhere over Edom. You shall die. Like mortals. Like any prince. It is hard to overstate how shocking that must feel in the room. These beings belong to the divine assembly. Their nature, rank, and place all mark them as more than human. And now the ruler of the council speaks the one thing that should not happen to gods. You will die like the creatures below, like kings dragged down from thrones, like princes who thought their walls were high enough and their armies big enough and their names heavy enough to survive judgment, only to end up wrapped in cloth and laid in the ground while other men divide their jewelry. The comparison is humiliating, like mortals, not in glory, not in transcendence, like ordinary flesh, like bodies that sweat and split and rot, like men buried under stones while mourners go home to eat lentils. It is one thing to be punished. It is another to be told you will end like the beings you ruled. That is not just judgment. That is public disgrace. You can almost feel the gods standing there in their splendor, hearing mortality pronounced over them like a stain spreading across silk. The sentence strips their office and then strips their category. Fall like any prince. Drop from your height. Hit the ground. Become what you once towered over. The room says nothing, not a word. That silence is brutal. No one protests. No defendant steps forward with mitigating circumstances. No one says the nations were difficult, the humans uncooperative, the whole assignment underfunded. The gods simply receive the judgment. And somehow that makes it heavier. Because if there were argument, this might feel like a debate. Instead, it feels final. Like a verdict everyone in the room already knows is justified. You stand there and realize you are watching the dismantling of a world. Not a metaphorical world, an actual ancient way of imagining reality itself. The nations had gods. The heavens had ranks. Authority was distributed. The Most High ruled. Above all, but beneath him were these divine sons, these governors of peoples and lands. And now the ruler stands in the middle of that structure and condemns its members to death. It is as if the chairman has called the board together only to announce the board is finished, the company is under new management, and also half the executives are about to drop dead in the parking lot. The old order is cracking right in front of you, and because this is only 8 verses, it happens with the speed of a trapdoor. One moment the gods are assembled in their places. The next, their authority has been exposed as failure and their future reduced to mortality. No appeal process, no waiting period, no ceremonial exit gift. just sentence. You almost want one clear look at their faces. Almost. But there is something more frightening about not getting that. They do not answer. They do not repent. They do not even snarl. Their silence leaves the focus where the psalm wants it, on the accusation and the judgment. The point is not their inner psychology. The point is that the Most High has spoken, and the divine administration of the nations has been found corrupt. Below, people are still suffering while this verdict rolls through heaven. You can feel the pressure of those earlier commands. Defend the weak, vindicate the orphan, rescue the needy, deliver the poor. These are not decorative moral accessories pinned onto the robe of God to make him look compassionate in portraits. This is the standard by which rulers are measured, even divine rulers, especially divine rulers. And that is what makes this little psalm so explosive. It takes the beings of the council, the sons of the Most High themselves, and says their legitimacy depends on justice for the vulnerable, not military success, not grandeur, not how much incense goes up in their honor, not how many kings invoke their names before battle. How do you treat the weak? That is the question. How do you govern when nobody important is watching? How do you use power when the people under you cannot repay you? The courtroom burns with that accusation, and the gods fail it. You begin to understand why this scene feels like a demolition charge tucked inside a song. It is not only strange because there are many gods in the room. It is dangerous because the Most High is willing to judge them for failing the poor. That means no seat in heaven protects you from accountability. No rank exempts you. No splendor excuses neglect. If the divine sons can be called to account for ignoring widows and orphans, every king below should probably start sweating through his linen immediately. The chamber seems larger now, but lonelier. The empty space around each divine seat has changed. Before, it felt like rank and order. Now it feels like vacancy in advance. Like the room already knows some of these chairs are living on borrowed time. You can almost imagine the nations below still calling on their gods. Moab pleading upward, Tyre loading ships and praying for profit. Babylon offering lavish worship with blood, grain, oil, and expensive confidence. And above all that religious noise, this verdict has already been spoken. Their rulers in heaven have failed. Their guardians are under sentence. Their glittering patrons are not secure. They are condemned. That is an astonishing thought to stand inside. Because ancient people did not live in a world of bland secular weather reports and neutral geopolitics. They lived in a world where every nation had divine backing, every border had heavenly significance, and every military disaster could feel like a supernatural humiliation. The sky was crowded with powers, and now the highest throne has declared those powers corrupt and mortal. You feel the room tip towards something larger. The final line rises from below like a plea, a response, a cry from earth toward the throne. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit all the nations. There it is. The psalm begins with God standing in the council, and it ends with a call for God to arise and judge the earth himself. Not through negligent intermediaries, not through corrupt divine governors who let injustice breed until the world smells like blood and debt. Himself. Take the nations back, inherit them, rule directly. The line comes with the force of a door being kicked open. The old arrangement has failed. The delegated authorities have botched the assignment so badly that the prayer now aims past them. No more regional managers. No more celestial subcontractors losing paperwork while villages starve. Arise, O God, you do it. You can feel why that prayer would matter. Imagine being one of the powerless below, one of the people who always lose when rulers become predators, one of the people whose appeal never gets heard because every gatekeeper is already bribed, every judge is already bought, every prince is already drunk on power and roasted meat. Then imagine hearing that even the gods over the nations have been called corrupt. Awful news at first. Then, strangely, hope. Because the final answer is not, well, that's unfortunate. Corruption seems widespread. The answer is that the highest judge has entered the courtroom, pronounced sentence, and laid claim to all nations at once. The nations are not abandoned. They are reclaimed. The room holds that possibility like thunder waiting to break. You can almost hear the creak of cosmic architecture shifting, seats losing status, chains of command rerouting, authority flowing back toward the center. The heavenly bureaucracy, so crowded and ordered and ancient, has just been hit with the kind of restructuring that leaves everyone staring at each other in the elevator. Nobody brought enough sandals for this level of upheaval. And the startling thing is how little flourish the psalm needs. 8 verses, no battle scene, no long speeches from the condemned, no dramatic cutaway to collapsing stars. It is almost severe in its brevity. A counsel, an accusation, a sentence, a claim on all nations. Done. That economy makes it worse. Like hearing a surgeon say very calmly, yes, we took the whole thing out. The restraint gives the verdict its force. No wasted motion, no ornament. Judgment as clean as a blade. You remain in the chamber after the words stop. That is where the weight settles. The gods are still there, but not as they were. Their titles now sound brittle. Their seats look temporary. The glow around them feels less like majesty and more like the last shine on a coin about to be melted down. At the center, the Most High remains what he was before, and more clearly than ever. Not one God among peers, not first among equals, the judge of the gods, the one who can appoint and condemn, the source from which their authority came, and the one who can strip it away when it curdles into oppression. That matters. Because this scene is not saying all gods are equal and one happened to win an argument. This is a courtroom, not a debate club. The verdict comes from above, not sideways. The gods are real enough to be judged and subordinate enough to be sentenced. You can almost feel your old assumptions wheezing in the corner. This little psalm has taken a crowbar to them. And still the human world waits below. The poor still need rescue. The fatherless still need justice. The destitute still need someone to care whether they eat. The wicked still have hands, armies, contracts, prisons, and polished speeches. The psalm does not solve all that in one neat cinematic sweep. Ancient life remains stubbornly grimy. Bread still needs grinding. Wounds still fester, taxes still arrive, goats still put their faces where no face should be. But something decisive has happened in heaven. The rulers of the nations have been called to account. The Most High has stood up. And once you have seen that, you cannot go back to imagining a quiet, empty sky. Because now you know there was a day in the divine council when God looked at the gods themselves and said, in effect, you had one job: protect the vulnerable, rescue the needy, do justice. Instead, you fed the wicked and let the world buckle. So now you fall, like men. like princes, like anything else that forgets whose authority it was carrying. The chamber does not erupt. No one applauds. No victory music swells from hidden corners of heaven. It just hangs there, the verdict settling over the council like ash after a fire. A few of the divine seats already feel emptier than they did a moment ago. And somewhere far below, in streets that stink of dung, sweat, lamp smoke, and wet clay, the nations go on breathing under a sentence they cannot yet hear. But heaven has heard it. The rulers have heard it. And the God who judged among the gods has not finished speaking. The sun is higher now, and the room you just left is still ringing in your bones. You have seen the gods sentenced. You have watched the heavenly board meeting turn into a firing squad without the arrows. The chairs are still there. The light is still cruelly bright. And somewhere in that vast chamber, the verdict is still hanging in the air like smoke after a lamp gets knocked over. But now we arrive at the part that makes the whole thing even stranger. Because this system did not just appear one day fully assembled, like a nightmare office building with glowing pillars and too many vice presidents. It had a beginning, a moment, a dividing line. A map was drawn. Not on parchment, not with ink and little decorative waves around the coastlines. This was older than that, bigger than that. The kind of dividing that happens when peoples are scattered, languages splinter, and the world gets sorted into nations like grain dumped into separate bins. You are standing at the edge of that moment. Now, the earth below looks raw. Cities are fewer, rougher, smaller. Mud brick walls, smoke leaking from roofs, cattle bawling, children barefoot in dirt packed hard enough to break your toes. Men argue over wells. Women carry jars that bite into their shoulders. Nobody is discussing personal fulfillment. They are trying not to die before the next harvest. Above them, the nations are being portioned out. The Most High sets boundaries. You can almost feel the world being measured. Coastlands here, mountains there, river valleys, deserts, trade roads, cedar hills, copper mines, salt flats, swamps full of mosquitoes the size of emotional support animals. Peoples are settling into place. Names are attaching to land. Moab, Edom, Egypt, Babylon, Tyre, Aram. And with each people, a divine assignment, not random, not vacant. Each nation receives a heavenly ruler, a patron, a god over its territory, a being from the council, one of the sons of God, given charge over a people and a place. It is administration on a cosmic scale, except the filing system includes storms, wars, omens, cattle fertility, kings, borders, and occasional plagues. It is less spiritual concept and more ancient international management structure with incense. You watch the nations fall into their allotments. One receives a god of storm and war. Another gets a deity of empire and city walls. Another gets a patron whose whole brand is basically mountains, battle, and national attitude problems. The ancient world is not secular, neutral, or politely compartmentalized. Every border has a face above it. Every kingdom has a name in heaven. And then comes the most personal line of all. The Lord's portion is his people, Jacob, his allotted heritage. That is the shock. The Most High portions out the nations to the sons of God, and one people he keeps. Not because they are impressive. They are not. Not because they have a superior urban planning department. They absolutely do not. He chooses Israel. You can feel what that means if you stand inside it. You are a tiny people in a rough land bridge between larger powers who could flatten you by sneezing in your direction. Egypt to the south, Assyria, later Babylon, to the north and east. Coastal powers making money off purple dye and sea trade. Desert tribes moving like weather. Armies everywhere. Taxes always. Dust in your teeth. And your claim is not, there are no other gods. Your claim is, the Most High chose us. That is different. Smaller in one way, much weirder in another. Because now the world around you makes a kind of frightening sense. Moab has Chemosh. Of course it does. Moab goes to war with Moab's god in its corner. Babylon has Marduk towering over its great, ugly, beautiful self, with its walls, temples, canals, scribes, and relentless confidence. Tyre has its gods with ships and commerce, and enough cedar to make everyone else jealous. Egypt has a whole divine portfolio so crowded it feels like a celestial group project nobody knows how to leave. This is not fairy tale material to you. This is geopolitics with a divine payroll. When Moab wins a battle, you do not shrug and say, well, things happen. You feel the pressure of Chemosh in it. When Babylon rises with brick walls thick enough to make your local fortifications look like a toddler's mud pie, you do not imagine heaven is empty. You imagine Marduk above it, receiving smoke from 1,000 offerings, while imperial administrators count grain and corpses with equal efficiency. The sky is crowded. That is the world you live in. Your village smells like dung, sour milk, and wool that got wet 3 days ago and never properly recovered. But above that ordinary misery is a cosmic arrangement. Nations below, gods above, and over all of them, the Most High. You feel the pride and the vulnerability of it at once. Because being chosen does not make you comfortable. It makes you responsible. It also makes you a target. You are not the biggest nation, not the richest, not the cleanest. Ancient Israelite village life is not exactly luxury spa content. Your bed is a mat. Your house has smoke damage as a personality. Your water jug tastes faintly of clay and old hands. A goat is always getting into something. Bread arrives hard enough to raise legal concerns. And still, your God is the one who claimed you as his own. That means when you look at the nations around you, you do not think, they have fake gods and we have a real one. No, that flattening comes later. At this stage, you look around and think, they have their gods, we have ours, but ours is the Most High. That is the difference. It is not atheism with sandals, it is hierarchy. The gods of the nations are real powers, but they are not at the top. They are allotted rulers, delegated authorities, regional governors, some dazzling, some terrible, some apparently asleep at the wheel, as Psalm 82 has already made hideously clear. And Israel belongs to the one above them all. That thought would put steel in your spine and acid in your stomach. Because every border crossing now feels theological. You travel east and enter Moabite land. The air is dry enough to crack your lips. The hills rise hard and stony. You pass shrines tucked into high places. You hear foreign prayers carried on wind that smells like dust, sheep grease, and cooking meat. The God here is not your God. This is Chemosh's territory. You feel it. Not like a cartoon villain lurking behind every hill. More like stepping into someone else's household where the furniture is wrong, the customs are wrong, and everybody keeps staring as if your sandals offended them personally. Different altars, different names in the songs, different sacrifices going up in the smoke. The land itself feels claimed. Or you go north toward Aram, where traders haggle in markets loud enough to scramble your thoughts. Donkeys bray, copper clinks, Sweat runs down backs under wool tunics that should have been washed a month ago. But water is work, so here we are. Men invoke their gods in bargains and curses. A deal is sealed in one divine name, a threat spat in another. Heaven is not abstract overhead mood lighting. It is threaded into contracts, battles, border stones, fertility rites, royal propaganda, and your aunt's alarming conviction that one particular hill is unlucky. Then Babylon. Oh, Babylon. You approach that city and immediately understand why people talk about it like it's swallowed the horizon. Walls huge enough to make your local defenses look like decorative landscaping. Gates glazed in colors so rich they seem almost edible. Processions, priests, officials, soldiers in numbers that make your stomach go hollow. Drains, canals, warehouses, temples, bureaucracy. So much bureaucracy. Clay tablets stacked like the world's driest nightmare. And over it all, Marduk. You can feel the confidence of that city in your teeth. Babylon does not act like a place hoping to survive. Babylon acts like a place expecting history to kneel. Its God is woven into its rise, its armies, its royal boasts, its festivals, its architecture, its ability to make conquered people feel very, very small. And you, little Israelite that you are, stand there with your dust, your dietary restrictions, your covenant, your goat problems, and your God. Not alone in the universe, but not abandoned in it either. That is the worldview. It is not neat. It is not modern. It is not the kind of thing you print on a mug and leave in the church gift shop between the peppermint tea and the inspirational bookmarks. It is messier than that. The nations really are under other powers. That is why military defeat feels so humiliating. It is not only losing to another army, it is crashing into another nation's God-backed order. It is watching their banners rise while yours go into the mud. It is hearing their victory songs and knowing those songs are not merely patriotic. They are theological chest-thumping with drums. When your enemies mock you, they are not just saying your soldiers are weak. They are saying your God lost. And when you answer that the Lord is above all gods, you are not speaking into an empty room. You are speaking into a world full of rival sanctuaries, rival names, rival smoke, rival power claims, and rival kings with very sharp metal objects. This makes the old songs feel different. The Lord is great above all gods. That line hits harder when all gods means actual beings in the worldview, not just chunks of carved wood with a fan club. The point is supremacy, not non-existence. Your God is not the only being in the sky. He is the highest one in the building, the chairman, the inheritor of all nations, the one who kept Jacob for himself. And now, after Psalm 82, you know what happened to some of those other rulers. They were judged, condemned, sentenced like incompetent divine landlords who let the whole property rot while pocketing the rent. So you look back to the division of nations and realize the original allotment was not a throwaway detail. It set up everything. Every war, every taunt, every national god with a shrine on a hill, every desperate prayer before battle, every king bragging that his deity gave him victory, every terrified villager wondering why the sky above neighboring peoples seems to answer different names. This is the origin story of the crowded heavens. And now we get to the truly awkward part. Because somewhere along the line, somebody got nervous. You can almost picture him. A scribe bent over a manuscript, shoulders tight, lamp smoking, rooms stuffy with old parchment, stale oil, and the smell of too many human beings working indoors without enough ventilation. His fingers are stained. His back hurts. His dinner was probably lentils again. A fly keeps landing on the same spot near the ink. Ancient office life is a bleak scene, and he comes to the line. When the Most High divided the nations, when he fixed the boundaries of the peoples, he did it according to the number of the sons of God. That is what the older wording has, sons of God, not sons of Israel. Sons of God makes immediate sense in the world you have been walking through. The nations are allotted among divine beings. The heavenly council gets its jurisdictions. Israel belongs to the Lord. Clean structure. Strange, yes, but internally solid. Then later, in another line of transmission, the wording shifts, sons of Israel. And the moment you hear it, you can feel the furniture scraping across the floor, because now the line is trying to behave itself. It is putting on a sweater. It is standing there with a nervous smile like, no, nothing weird happened here. Probably just some demographic remark about Israel's family numbers. Absolutely no cosmic allotment of nations to divine beings. Why would you even ask that? But the room still smells like the earlier version. You know when someone has tried to clean up after a disaster and only made it more obvious. They wipe half the table, shove the broken cup behind a basket, and now there's just a suspicious wet patch and a very visible handle sticking out. That is what this change feels like, because Sons of Israel does not fit the old cosmic scene nearly as well. The nations being divided according to the number of Israel makes you squint. Israel as a people is not the administrative grid for world assignment in that older world view. The sons of God are. They are the council members. They are the delegated rulers. They are the whole strange cast of heavenly officials standing behind the map. So, when the wording shifts, you can practically feel discomfort breathing through the page. Someone, somewhere, is less comfortable with the older picture than the older writers were. By then, maybe the idea of the nations being allotted to divine beings had started to feel dangerous. Too crowded, too mythic, too easy to misunderstand, too close to saying out loud what later generations were trying very hard to say differently. The old line still had all the old furniture in it, multiple divine beings, divided nations, one people as the Lord's own portion. And some later hands looked at that room and thought, absolutely not. We are not hosting that dinner party anymore. So they softened it. Not enough to erase everything. Just enough to make the verse less likely to start a family argument. But the older wording survived, like wallpaper under paint, like a draft in a sealed room, like finding out the house you bought has an entire previous staircase hidden behind a wall, and now you can't. Stop thinking about who exactly thought that was a reasonable renovation choice. You stand over the line and feel the older world pressing upward through it. The Most High, the division of nations, the sons of God, the Lord's own portion. There it is, the whole arrangement. The ancient Israelite hearing this would not blink the way many modern readers do. He lives in a world where every people has a patron deity. Of course, the nations were allotted. Of course, there are divine beings over them. The shock is not that other nations have gods. The shock is that Israel's God is not one local deity among many. He is the one above the many, and he chose a people for himself. That changes how you hear everything else. When Israel is forbidden to go after other gods, It is not because those gods are imaginary in the minds of the earliest hearers. It is because they are not Israel's. They belong to other peoples, other allotments, other heavenly jurisdictions. To worship them would be treachery, not because they are made-up nonsense, but because you have been claimed already. The covenant is exclusivity, not denial. Like a marriage in a neighborhood full of very bad options, do not go after them, do not serve them, do not bow down. Not because there is nothing there, because there is, and it is not yours. That is a much sharper warning. It also explains the persistent panic about high places, foreign altars, neighboring cults, and kings who keep importing gods like they are collecting decorative lamps from international travel. Every borrowed deity is not just a bad idea. It is a loyalty breach, an ancient spiritual version of forwarding company secrets to your competitor while also stealing office snacks. No wonder everybody keeps losing their minds about it. You feel how vulnerable Israel would be in that world. Small nation, powerful neighbors, strong gods attached to stronger empires. There is always pressure to hedge your bets. Burn little incense here. Make a treaty there. Add one more shrine just in case. Keep Yahweh, obviously, but maybe also sprinkle in some extra divine coverage, like a man terrified of weather buying every insurance policy at the market. Ancient syncretism is basically panic with candles. And into that anxiety comes the old claim again. The Lord's portion is His people, not shared, not borrowed, His. That is why the division of nations matters so much. It is not trivia, it is identity. It tells you what kind of world you are living in and where you stand inside it. The world is populated, the nations are governed, the heavens are structured, your God is supreme. Your people are His inheritance. And every time you hear of Chemosh, Marduk, Baal, Milcom, or any other divine name rattling around the map, you hear it against that backdrop. Real powers, subordinate powers, dangerous powers, judged powers. Because now Psalm 82 is echoing behind all of this. Those allotted gods, they were not eternal fixtures. They could fail. They did fail. The Most High could stand in their assembly and condemn them for running their nations like corrupt landlords, with blood on the thresholds and bribes in the pantry. So the division of nations is not only about assignment, it is about accountability. The nations were handed out, the rulers were watched, and eventually some of them heard the worst sentence a god could hear. You will die like men. That line should make every national temple suddenly feel draftier. Picture a worshipper in Moab bringing an offering to Chemosh. Fat hisses in the fire. Smoke rises. Priests chant. The shrine smells like blood, ash, wool, and old stone baked hot all day. Everything looks impressive. Official, ancient, durable. And above it all hangs a verdict already spoken in heaven. Or Babylon, glowing with confidence, all polished brick and imperial swagger. Marduk's processions roll through the city. Drums beat. Incense burns thick enough to make your eyes water. Bureaucrats scribble records while oxen grunt in the courtyard, and someone nearby is definitely stepping in something unpleasant with expensive sandals. It all feels permanent. It isn't. That is the tension now. The nations have their gods, but the gods themselves are on borrowed time. You stand between those two truths, and the whole Bible starts to feel less like a flat statement and more like a long struggle inside a very crowded universe. Israel's earliest world is not one lonely throne in an empty sky. It is a world of powers, territories, rivalries, loyalties, judgments, and a Most High who gives nations over, keeps one for himself, and eventually rises to reclaim them all. That is where this story is headed. The allotment happened first. The audit came later. And from this point on, every border, every altar, every taunt from a foreign king, every warning against other gods, every cry that the Lord is above all gods, carries the memory of that first division. The map was never merely political. It was heavenly. The nations below kept marching, trading, conquering, sacrificing, boasting, starving, marrying, burying, and building. The smells did not improve. Mud still clung to hems. Fish still rotted in market heat. Priests still got smoke in their beards. Kings still overestimated themselves with a confidence that would be funny if it were not so lethal. But over all that bustle, the old arrangement remained, until it didn't. And somewhere in the copying of a line, in the nervous smoothing of sons of God into something safer, you can feel later hands trying to tidy a room that had once been gloriously, dangerously full. A sound starts before you see anything. Not music, not exactly. More like metal shrieking inside a furnace while a storm screams through a canyon and somebody the size of a mountain inhales. The air changes first, hotter, sharper. Your skin prickles as if the room has suddenly filled with static and judgment. You look up, and whatever polite little angel sketch has been living in your imagination dies instantly. Because the council chamber does not just have a chairman and a circle of divine officials, it has attendants, throne bearers, guardians, and things that look like they were assembled from separate nightmares by a committee that refused to communicate. This is the part nobody puts on nursery walls. You have probably been picturing robes, human faces, maybe some tasteful wings, soft lighting, gold curls, the sort of creature that could play a harp without alarming the livestock. No, what rushes around the throne is not soft. It is not tasteful. It is not remotely interested in your decorative church bulletin aesthetic. The first ones you see are burning. That is the only word your brain can grab before the rest of it catches up. They move above the throne in arcs of heat and brightness, and for one confused second, you think they are flames with intentions. Then they turn. Faces, wings, motion. Too much of all three. 6 wings each, not 2. Not the usual artist's comfortable pair. 6. 2 cover the face, as if even they do not casually stare at the glory in the center of the room. 2 cover the feet. 2 beat the air so hard the whole chamber shudders. And these are Seraphim. The name itself has heat in it. Burning ones. Not plump little sky cherubs with dimples and recreational trumpets. Burning ones. You feel the word in your molars. They circle above you with the wrong kind of grace. Not bird-like, not insect-like, not anything your body knows how to file correctly. Their movement is too fluid for reptiles, too deliberate for sparks, too alive for fire. And once you realize what ancient people heard in that name, the picture gets even stranger. Serpents. Flying serpents. You are standing under flaming winged serpentine throne attendants, singing at a volume that makes the doorframes shake. Ancient religion really said, what if the cobra was on fire and had 6 wings and worked in upper management? The sound hits again. Holy, holy, holy. It is not sung sweetly. Nobody is doing choir posture. This is not a candlelight Christmas Eve situation. The cry slams into the room like a battering ram. Stone groans. Thresholds tremble. Dust rattles loose from cracks high in the walls. The floor under your sandals vibrates just enough to make you hate it. Your ribs feel it. Your teeth feel it. If you had anything in your stomach besides stale bread and the memory of lentils, it might be reconsidering its commitment to staying down. Smoke is everywhere now. Not cozy incense haze either. Thick temple smoke. Acrid, oily, throat-clawing smoke that gets into your eyes and beard and clothes and dignity. The whole room smells like burning resin, hot metal, scorched wool, and fear. Mostly fear. One seraph sweeps lower, and you catch a clearer glimpse. You immediately wish you hadn't. Its body is not arranged for your comfort. The wings overlap in a blur of brightness. Beneath them, glimpses of something sinuous and terrible. Not a cartoon snake, not a zoology exhibit, a throne creature, an ancient symbol of dangerous holiness, with enough heat pouring off it to dry your mouth from 10 paces away. Your survival instincts are doing their best. They are failing. And this image did not come from nowhere. You know that now because you have been walking through this world long enough to recognize the neighbors. Egypt had its Urei, those rearing cobras blazing from royal crowns, guardians of kingship, symbols of terrible protection. You have seen them carved above doorways and, painted on walls, their hoods flared as if insulted by human existence. Now imagine one of those, but alive. Then add wings, then add fire, then give it liturgical responsibilities. That is a seraph. Suddenly, the throne room feels less like a palace and more like the world's least relaxing embassy lobby. Every culture around Israel had guardian creatures baked into its art. Winged cobras in Egypt, composite beasts in Syria, hybrid protectors glaring from palace gates in Mesopotamia. You walked past them on walls and standards and carved ivories. You saw them on seals, furniture, and temple reliefs. The difference now is that they have stepped off the stone and into the room with you. They are moving, and they are loud. One of them peels away from the circle with something glowing in its grasp. A coal, just casually. Lifted from the altar with tongs, because apparently being a burning serpent does not mean you skip workplace safety altogether. The coal glows white at the edges, red at the center, shedding sparks that vanish before they hit the floor. You can smell it before it gets near. Mineral heat, ash, the bitter edge of charred offering. The creature carries it like it weighs nothing. You, meanwhile, would drop it instantly, scream, and probably die in a very embarrassing posture. The room is full of this kind of impossible competence, things no human should see carrying out procedures as if this is a normal Tuesday at the office of God. The seraph touches the coal to lips. Flesh does not sizzle the way you expect, but the point lands hard enough. Purification here is not a scented candle and a quiet song. It is fire to the mouth. No wonder the doorposts are having a hard time. But the seraphim are only the first shock, because then your attention drops lower toward the throne itself, and matters become aggressively less drawable. You have heard the word cherub so many times that it has probably been ruined for you. It got kidnapped by Renaissance babies and greeting card fluff. Somewhere along the line, cherub started meaning a toddler with wings and a face like a dinner roll. The actual cherub would make that toddler cry immediately. These are not babies. These are not cute. These are not available in porcelain figurines for your aunt's curio cabinet. The throne is not sitting on polished flooring like respectable furniture. It is borne, supported, carried by living beings that seem built out of categories refusing to stay in their lanes. You stare, and your brain starts making the same noise a donkey makes when it does not want to cross a stream. Each one has multiple faces: human, lion, ox, eagle. Not one after another in a parade, but all at once, a face in each direction. Intelligence staring one way, wild predatory power another, brute strength in a third, and raptor swift sky terror in the fourth. It is like someone took the most symbolically loaded creatures they knew, shoved them into one body, and then gave up on keeping it psychologically manageable. You do not know where to look. That is part of the problem. Look at the human face, and the lion catches your peripheral vision. Focus on the lion, and there is the ox, broad and immovable. Notice the eagle beak and those eyes, and suddenly you are aware that this thing does not turn to see. It already sees, in every direction, all the time. Privacy was never an option in this room. Their bodies are no comfort either. Wings spread above and beside them, touching one another in a kind of living geometry. Under the wings, hands, human hands, which somehow makes everything worse. It is one thing to see an impossible beast. It is another to see that impossible beast has hands, dexterous and purposeful, emerging from beneath feathers and power. Their legs are straight, ending in hooves that gleam like burnished bronze. Of course they do. Why would this stop at ordinary ankles? The sound when they move is immense. Not flapping, exactly. More like a regiment of chariots, a flash flood over stone, heavy storm wind punching through cedar doors. The noise fills every spare inch of your head. You can feel it in your shoulder blades. Standing near them feels medically unwise. And yet these creatures are not random monsters tossed in for special effects. They are throne guardians, throne bearers, the living platform of divine presence. In the sanctuary, their carved forms spread wings over the ark. In the visions, they are not decoration. They are the vehicle. God rides the cherubim. Try putting that on a throw pillow. You have seen their cousins before too, if you've ever stood before an Assyrian gate. Lamassu, colossal hybrid guardians with human heads, bull or lion bodies, and wings, planted at palace entrances to tell every visitor in stone that power lives here and would like you to feel weird about it. You approach one and immediately understand that this kingdom has money, muscle, and a very specific interest in making foreigners nervous. Now remove the stone. Let it breathe. Let all four faces live. Let the wings thunder. That gets you closer. The Israelites did not invent hybrid guardian creatures after a quiet weekend of creative brainstorming. They lived in a world saturated with them. Palace walls, temple doors, ivories, seals, embroidered fabrics, carved furniture. Winged beings guarded sacred spaces all over the ancient Near East. Everyone around you is already speaking this visual language. Israel speaks it too. Only in this throne room, the art starts moving, and your categories fall apart like cheap sandals in spring mud. One cherub shifts, and the throne above it moves with impossible smoothness. No jolting, no strain. The creature does not grimace. It does not even seem burdened. It simply is built for this. Power under power. You catch the smell of hot metal again. Bronze and storm. A breeze whips past your face, stirred by their wings, carrying smoke and something cleaner underneath, sharp as rain on stone. The air around them is alive. Not pleasant. Alive? And now we arrive at the part that makes Ezekiel everyone's least favorite illustrated children's Bible challenge. The wheels. You hear them before you understand them. A rolling, grinding rush, but not clumsy, not wagon wheels over ruts. More precise than that, faster, like machinery, except no one in your world has machinery like this. The sound has a pulse in it, a terrible synchronization, as if every turning part already knows where every other part will be. Then you see them, one wheel intersecting another, wheel within wheel, not next to the creature, beside each cherub, bound up with it somehow, moving when it moves, stopping when it stops, rising when it rises. The whole assembly operates as one organism, one throne chariot system of faces, wings, hands, hooves, and rotating geometry. And the rims are full of eyes, eyes everywhere, not a tasteful symbolic few, not a discrete motif, covered, rimmed all around with eyes, open eyes, watching eyes, more eyes than any sane person would approve. You do not glance at these wheels. You get stared at by transportation. The Ophanim are what happen when a throne decides it wants to be mobile and horrifying. You look for a blank surface. There isn't one. Everywhere your gaze lands, an eye looks back. Small ones, large ones, glinting in reflected fire, wet with awareness. It is the exact opposite of restful. If a potter tried to describe this after too much fermented date drink, his friends would stage an intervention. And yet the movement is flawless. The wheels do not wobble. They glide in directions that should require turning, but do not. Forward without rotation, sideways without adjustment, upward with the cherubim as if gravity has signed a waiver and gone home. Their motion has that deeply upsetting quality of being efficient in ways your body knows are wrong. The sound grows until it fills the chamber. Wings, voices, wheels, fire flashing among the creatures. It is not one sensation. It is all sensations arriving at once and elbowing each other for space. You smell hot stone, smoke, oil, and ozone. You hear praise loud enough to crack cedar. You feel heat on your cheeks, vibration under your feet, and the tiny animal part of your brain yelling that the safest possible location is elsewhere. Elsewhere is not available. What makes these beings so overwhelming is not merely that they are ugly or strange. Some parts are terrible. Yes, some parts are magnificent. The real problem is that they ignore your categories. They are not beast, bird, snake, man, flame, machine, or furniture. They are all of it at once. Your mind likes drawers. Label this, sort that. Dangerous animal, noble bird, human face, ceremonial object. The throne room says no. Absolutely not. All drawers are now on fire. It gives you a six-winged serpent praising non-stop, a four-faced guardian with bronze hooves and human hands, and wheels covered in eyes that move like they have opinions. No wonder people fall on their faces. It is not only reverence, it is neurological surrender. You are seeing beings that do not fit the normal grammar of creation. Land, sea, sky, domestic, wild, human, animal, sacred object. All those nice, tidy boxes collapse in a heap. The cherub combines apex predator, work animal, bird of the heights, and human intelligence. The seraph combines serpent, flame, and flight. The wheel combines mobility, awareness, and enough visual input to make your scalp tighten. These are border-crossing beings, threshold creatures, exactly the kind ancient temples and palaces loved to station near holy places and royal power. That is where all those cultural cousins matter. Egypt's rearing cobras, Assyria's lamassu, Levantine winged sphinxes, guardian hybrids on ivories and thrones and gateways. You are in a world where power announces itself with composite creatures, because ordinary goats and pigeons simply do not communicate the right level of cosmic danger. Everybody knew that. If you wanted to say, this place is guarded, this king is protected, this god is not to be approached casually, you carved something with wings and extra anatomy. And Israel, for all its arguments with the nations around it, lived in that same visual weather. So when the temple furnishings bloom with cherubim, when visions explode with seraphim and living wheels, none of this arrives from nowhere. It rises out of a shared ancient imagination already crowded with throne guardians, winged beings, fiery serpents, and hybrid protectors. The difference is the intensity. The difference is that in Israel's visions, the guardians are not just at the door. They are in motion around the living God. That motion matters, because this throne is not trapped. That is one of Ezekiel's great shocks. You are far from the temple. The familiar center is gone, or threatened, or inaccessible. And then suddenly, the divine presence shows up on a mobile platform of terrifying biology and impossible wheels. The throne has left the building. God is not stranded in one shrine like a local idol waiting for maintenance. He arrives on cherubim, with eyes on the wheels and fire among the creatures, and the sort of soundscape that would make your village ox lie down and rethink everything. You can see why later generations reached for the word angel and hoped that might tidy things up. Angel is so manageable. Angel sounds like a messenger in a robe. Angel sounds like somebody who might knock politely before announcing doom. Angel gives you categories back: seraph, cherub, ophanim. Those names do not tidy. They make the room stranger. And they should, because the throne room is not populated by generic winged people in coordinated white outfits. It is populated by rank upon rank of beings, some administrative, some judicial, some military, some liturgical, and some apparently designed to remind you that heaven is not a middle management seminar with clouds. It is older than your comfort. It is wilder than your art. At some point, you realize the council chamber has become crowded in a new way, not merely with gods and heavenly sons and prosecuting figures and delegated rulers. Now, it is full of living symbols of power, holiness, mobility, and danger. The court is not sterile. It hums, it burns, it watches. Every part of it is awake. And your body knows that before your theology does. Sweat sticks your tunic to your back. Smoke dries your throat. Your knees ache from trying not to collapse in a room where collapsing feels both wise and insufficient. A seraph passes overhead, and the heat follows a second after, like opening an oven the size of a city gate. A cherub turns without turning. The wheels. Beside it, flash with eyes. The throne remains above them all. You stand there, tiny and mortal, and made mostly of water, while the architecture of heaven refuses every harmless picture you have ever inherited. This is not sentimental religion. This is not pale, soft-focused spirituality. This is a cosmos where holiness has edges, faces, wings, fire, and noise levels that should require a permit. And once you have seen these creatures, you cannot go back to imagining the divine council as a room full of interchangeable feathered interns. No, it is a court with a chairman, a chamber of condemned gods, a map of nations once assigned out like territories in a celestial empire, and surrounding the throne, attending it, carrying it, guarding it, singing around it, are the weird ones, the burning serpents, the four-faced throne beasts, The wheels nobody wants to draw, because every attempt ends with the artist muttering, "Absolutely not," and going outside to stare at a tree for emotional recovery. You are still looking at them when the next realization arrives. Because rooms this crowded do not stay crowded forever. And when the heavens begin to change, these beings will have to go somewhere too. 3 generations pass. The smoke changes first. Not temple smoke now, not cedar and resin and roasted offering. This smoke is meaner. It gets in your nose and stays there. Burned beams, cracked plaster, wet ash, scorched linen, and the greasy reek of a city that has been broken open like a cooking pot dropped on stone. You stand where the temple stood, or rather, where it used to stand before Babylon turned it into a blackened memory with foundation stones. The gold is gone. The curtains are gone. The singing is gone. All that careful architecture of holiness, all those courtyards and laver basins and lampstands and carved cherubim, reduced to smoke-stained rubble and little curls of heat rising from places you should not be able to step on. Your sandal crunches over charcoal. Somewhere nearby, somebody is still crying. Not the dramatic kind either. No raised arms. No neat public grief. This is the exhausted kind, the throat-scraped kind, the kind that comes out of people who have run out of words and are now just leaking sorrow into their beards. And now you have a problem so large it makes hunger feel manageable. If the house of your God is ash, what does that mean about your God? Because everybody around you knows how this usually works. Cities lose. Gods lose. Temples get emptied because the stronger God backed the stronger army. You don't need a theology degree for this. You need eyes. Marduk still has a house. Babylon still has walls. Your temple is a ruin full of hot dust and splinters. It looks bad. It looks extremely bad. This is the ancient Near Eastern version of your team getting obliterated on live television, except the stadium is on fire and half your family is in chains. So the survivors do what survivors always do. They talk. At first in whispers, because grief makes everyone sound like they're speaking through cracked pottery. You hear names of old enemies. Chemosh, Milcom, Marduk, Nebo. The gods of the nations are still sitting pretty in their own shrines with their own priests and their own expensive snacks. Meanwhile, you are standing ankle-deep in soot, wondering whether the god who rode cherubim has just been out-muscled by a city full of astrologers and brick enthusiasts. Nobody wants to say that out loud. Somebody says it anyway. Did he lose? The question lands like a dropped millstone. No one likes it. Everyone feels it. You can almost hear older ideas creaking under the weight. The old world had room for many divine beings. Your God was greater, yes. Stronger, yes. Higher, yes. But the nations had their own powers, their own patrons, their own heavenly management structure. You had a cosmic map. It made sense. Weird sense, but sense. Each nation under its assigned ruler, Israel belonging especially to the Most High, the council chamber crowded and noisy. That setup worked a lot better before the temple burned. Now you are in Babylon, and Babylon is offensively successful. The walls are huge. The processional ways are polished. The statues are washed, dressed, perfumed, and paraded around like celebrity landlords. The Euphrates slides through the city like it pays rent. Everywhere you look, somebody's god is receiving better treatment than you are. And the smell. Oh, the smell. Babylon smells rich. River mud, bitumen, date syrup, fish guts, smoke from brick kilns, hot reeds, animal dung, sweat under wool, and sweet incense burning in front of images with jeweled eyes. It is the smell of empire, crowded, expensive, and deeply unconcerned with your feelings. You shuffle through streets broad enough for chariots. Your own clothes still carry the smoke of Jerusalem. That contrast hurts. Babylon has baths, canals, storehouses, scribal schools, warehouses full of grain, and enough carved lions on the walls to make you feel personally stared at. Your home has become a pile of blackened memories. It is a difficult time to maintain cheerful theological nuance, and so something hard begins to happen. Not in one afternoon, not with a trumpet blast, more like a wound scabbing over layer by layer, ugly and necessary. You hear it first in prayer, then in songs, then in arguments by lamplight after a dinner of lentils so thin you can count the legumes individually. Maybe he didn't lose. Maybe there was never anyone there to lose to. That idea would have sounded strange earlier, bold, maybe even rude. The kind of thing somebody says after too much wine and not enough caution. But exile is a brutal editor. It strips away whatever no longer keeps you alive. If your old map leaves room for the possibility that Babylon's gods just beat yours fair and square, then that map is now a problem. So the map gets redrawn, slowly, painfully. At first, you still talk as if the nations have their powers. Old habits die like old donkeys, loudly, stubbornly, and in a smell you can't remove from the courtyard for days. But then a prophet starts speaking in Babylon with a voice like dry wood catching fire. You hear him in a gathering by the river, the air damp with reeds and insects. Mosquitoes whine around your ears. Mud sucks at your sandals. Somebody nearby has brought onions, and their breath is doing violence to the concept of fellowship. The prophet lifts his voice anyway. I am the Lord, and there is no other. The words hit differently here. Back in the land, with vineyards and festivals and a temple still standing, they would sound like loyalty. Strong loyalty, yes, but still loyalty. In Babylon, with foreign gods towering over polished streets and your own people trying not to come apart, the sentence becomes dynamite. There is no other, not none greater, not none to compare, no other. You feel your stomach tighten when you hear it, because that is not merely devotion. That is a total demolition of the old furniture. The chairs in the council chamber are not just emptying. Somebody is dragging them out to the alley and setting them on fire. People repeat the line in low voices. Some do it with relief. Some with the expression of a man told his family goat has become indoor housing for the winter. Necessary, perhaps. Still upsetting. The prophet keeps going. He doesn't soften it. He doesn't leave room for a little diplomatic spiritual pluralism on the side. He says the makers of idols are ridiculous. He says they cut down a tree, burn half of it for dinner, and carve the other half into a god. One part warms your soup. The other part receives your prayers. Bronze Age customer service was not at its peak. You can hear the laughter around that line. Tired laughter, bitter laughter, the kind that comes out when your world has collapsed and somebody finally says the absurd thing plainly. A carpenter shapes a god, then he gets hungry. That is hard to unsee. And now the old divine rivals start to shrink, not all at once. This takes centuries. But the shrinking begins. What once stood as heavenly powers over nations starts getting talked about like carved wood, cast metal, wind, emptiness, less than breath. The great foreign gods of older generations are not defeated colleagues anymore. They are embarrassments. Decor with a priesthood. That shift changes everything. Because once you say the other gods are nothing, the old stories get awkward. Very awkward. You know the ones. The ancient lines that still smell like the earlier world. Nations divided among heavenly sons. Gods judged in assembly. Divine beings reporting, accusing, receiving assignments. Passages where the room is crowded and nobody seems shocked by that. Those old verses don't vanish. Sacred words are sticky things. People memorize them, sing them, recite them while grinding grain. You can't just toss them in a ditch because they make your newer theology sweat. So you do what scribes do. You copy, you preserve, you adjust. Picture a lamplit room. The oil smells thick and faintly rancid. The scribe's fingers are stained black. His back hurts. Of course it hurts. He has been bent over a scroll all day while flies auditioned for his eyelids, and the room keeps getting hotter because someone shut the window against dust. He writes carefully because one mistake means scraping ink and cursing under his breath. He knows the old phrases. He also knows they now sound dangerous, so little changes begin to appear. A line that once pointed to sons of God begins to look more like sons of Israel. That is a very different sentence. One gives you a world parceled out among heavenly beings. The other gives you a census problem. One smells like the old council chamber. The other smells like somebody tidied the room before guests arrived and shoved 3 suspicious chairs into a storage closet. You can almost feel the discomfort in the ink. It is not clumsy. Nobody is scribbling, "Please ignore earlier theology" in the margin. It is subtler than that. A word replaced, a reading preferred, a phrase nudged towards safety. The kind of change a careful copyist can make while still looking respectable over lentil stew. And those are only the little edits. The bigger transformation happens through retelling. The old heavenly beings do not all disappear. That would be too clean. Ancient religion is never clean. It is more like inheriting a family house where every generation added a room, sealed a doorway, painted over a mural, then left 3 alarming objects in the attic wrapped in old cloth. The beings stay. Their job titles change. A son of God becomes an angel. A council member becomes a messenger. A rival power becomes a demon. A heavenly prosecutor becomes the devil with a capital letter and an entire future wardrobe of horns that nobody in your current century has invented yet. This is what happens when theology cleans house, but can't bear to throw everything away. The weird furniture gets relabeled. That terrifying side table from grandmother's parlor is now rustic. The council chamber is now angelology. Same room, new brochure. You can watch it happen in the atmosphere of the stories. Earlier, a divine being might stride in like he belongs there. Later, the language gets more careful, safer, more hierarchical in a way familiar to later readers. The heavenly world is still populated, but now everyone works for one God so absolutely that the old sense of a rowdy divine assembly has been pressed flat, ironed, folded, and put in a drawer marked "Do Not Disturb." Even the translation habits start to shift. A word that once sat there with unnerving divine weight begins getting rendered in ways that won't start family arguments at dinner. Gods become rulers. Divine beings become angels. The rough edges get sanded down. You can almost hear the sanding too. Scritch, scritch, scritch. 1,000 years of scribes and translators trying to keep people from noticing that the wallpaper underneath is older and stranger than the paint on top. But the seams show. They always show. You hear one in a psalm and stop chewing. You catch one in a blessing and look up. A sentence flashes by that still assumes a crowded heaven. A title appears in plural. A memory survives in a line that later readers rush past because they are late for monotheism and do not want to miss the train. That is the maddening part. The old world never fully leaves. It leaks, like rain through a patched roof, like the smell of fish that stays in a basket no matter how much you wash it, like smoke in a cloak months after the fire. You can demote the gods, rename the gods, mock the gods, call them idols, call them demons, call them vanity, call them nothing at all. Fine. But older passages still sit there, calm as you please, remembering a time when the heavens had layers and personnel and assignments, and now you are living in the in-between. That is the uncomfortable century, maybe 2 centuries, maybe more. The temple is rebuilt eventually, but it is not the same. You can feel that before anyone says it. The new stones are clean, yes. The priests know their duties. Sacrifices return. Smoke rises again. But the room in people's heads has changed. The old cosmic council has not vanished from memory, yet no one wants those former gods back in the seating chart. Not after exile. Not after Babylon. Not after standing by foreign rivers asking whether your God lost. That question burned too deep, so the answer hardens. He did not lose. He was never competing. The nations were never under legitimate divine rivals. Their so-called gods are wind, breath, fraud, carved nonsense with expensive jewelry. Men carry them because they cannot walk. Men wash them because they cannot clean themselves. Men nail them down so they do not topple over in an embarrassing public incident. Hard to inspire cosmic dread when your worshippers have to prop you upright. This mockery matters. You hear it in workshops, in marketplaces, in songs. It has teeth. Once, foreign gods were feared competitors in a crowded supernatural landscape. Now they are the punchline. A block of wood with a face, a lump of silver with excellent eyebrows and no pulse. The joke keeps repeating because the wound underneath is serious. If Babylon's gods are ridiculous, then Babylon's triumph cannot mean what it looked like. This is survival by theological demolition. And yet old habits keep peeking through the curtains. Second Temple writings start filling the heavens again, because apparently humans cannot stare into the unseen and leave it unfurnished. Angels multiply. Named angels, ranked angels. Watchers, princes, messengers, destroyers, thrones, powers. The bureaucracy of heaven is back. Only now everybody wears a monotheistic employee badge. You have seen this kind of institutional rebrand before. The king changes. The palace staff remains. Different uniforms. Same corridors. Some ancient divine beings are folded into the angelic host. Some are cast downward and darkened into rebel spirits. Some become memories too blurry to classify. Their names survive in odd corners, in place names, in taunts, in poetic flashes. Dawn stars, princes of nations, host of heaven. Deep old language still clinging to the stone like moss. Even the adversaries change character under your feet. The prosecutor who once walked into the council chamber like a court official with paperwork becomes, over time, a much more menacing figure. Sharper, darker, more singular. By the time later imaginations get hold of him, he is no longer merely the guy from legal who asks uncomfortable questions at the meeting. He is cosmic opposition, full villain energy, better branding, worse attitude. Again, same old room, new lighting. And all of this takes shape because exile forced a choice. You could not keep telling the old story exactly the old way after Jerusalem fell. Not without leaving open the possibility that Yahweh had simply been outperformed by Marduk in a very public and humiliating contest. So the faith of Israel did something astonishing. It did not merely double down on loyalty, it redefined reality. There is no other. Not behind the nations, not beside him, not above, below, or waiting in the wings with regional authority and an official seal. That claim is new enough to feel sharp in your mouth. It cuts the old framework loose. It also gives a shattered people something they desperately need. If there is only one true God, then Babylon's victory cannot be divine defeat. It can only be judgment, discipline, mystery, wrath, correction, anything but loss. The empire does not own history. Marduk does not own the scoreboard. The Most High did not get evicted from his job by a city with nice brickwork. That is the reinvention, and it is enormous. You feel it in the prayers of exiles. You feel it in the confidence of later readers who inherit the final form and never realize how much furniture got moved before they arrived. They walk into the house and think it was always arranged this way. One God, angels, demons, idols are fake, straightforward enough. Meanwhile, under the floorboards, the older timbers creak. A psalm remembers. A fragment preserves an older reading. A prophet mocks idols so hard you can tell they were once considered dangerous. A council scene survives with all the chairs still visible. The disappearing act was never total. It was gradual, practical, wounded, brilliant, and a little messy. Like most survival. And so, over centuries, the council chamber empties. One chair goes first, then another. A god becomes a messenger. A ruler becomes a spirit. A patron of nations becomes a joke, a demon, or a footnote everyone reads too quickly. The room grows quieter, cleaner, easier to explain to children, much less alarming for decorators, but not entirely empty, because no matter how carefully you edit, copy, preach, sing, and translate, the old echoes cling on. In a phrase here, a title there, a strange plural that refuses to behave, a heavenly host still standing by, a prince over a nation, a courtroom scene that remembers exactly how crowded heaven used to be. The chairs are removed one by one. The marks remain in the floor. The council chamber is quiet now. Too quiet, honestly. You stand there in the hush after the furniture moving is done, and the room feels like an old government building after a regime change. The banners are different. The names on the doors have been scraped off. Somebody has brought in fresh lamps and a stricter memo about who is allowed to sit where. But the architecture? Still the same. The walls remember, and the story keeps going. You feel it first, not in thunder, but in paperwork. Because once the old gods are pushed out, renamed, mocked, or folded into safer categories, heaven does not become empty. It becomes organized, intensely organized, disturbingly organized. The cosmos turns into the sort of place where everybody has a title, a function, and apparently access to a trumpet. You look up, and the sky is full again. Only now the beings are called angels, messengers, ministers, hosts. That sounds nicer, doesn't it? Cleaner, more manageable, like replacing feral divine powers assigned to nations with customer service representatives of the Almighty. But then you meet them in the stories and realize they are still terrifying. They still show up glowing in the dark, making grown men collapse like badly stacked laundry. They still bring announcements, judgments, plagues, and enough existential panic to ruin several generations. Same old room, new job descriptions. You can see the shift most clearly when heaven starts developing rank. Not just random winged people floating around looking decorative. No, this place has structure. There are archangels now, named ones, Michael, Gabriel, the kind of beings who sound like they should have offices, seals, and a drawer full of celestial incident reports. Michael is not a chubby baby with a harp. Michael is military. You feel that immediately. Armor, command, confrontation. He is the kind of figure who steps into a vision and changes the temperature of the whole scene. Somewhere, metal flashes. Somewhere, a sword is involved. Nobody offers him figs and asks how the journey was. And Gabriel? Gabriel arrives with message energy so intense it peels the bark off your nerves. He does not drift in like a scented breeze. He appears, speaks, and leaves humans blinking, shaking, and trying to remember how kneecaps work. This is not a greeting card ecosystem. This is heaven with a chain of command. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. Those angels are doing an awful lot of work the old council members used to do. They stand in attendance. They carry messages. They oversee things. They fight. They interpret. They report. You have seen this movie before, only the cast has changed wardrobe. Where there were once sons of God, now there are angels in ranked formations. Where there were once divine beings attached to nations, now there are princes, rulers, powers, authorities, different labels. Same stubborn idea that the world is not merely dirt, kings, taxes, and barley. There are powers above the powers, layers over the layers, bureaucracy all the way up. You hear it in visions that smell like lamp smoke and old wool. Take Daniel. You are standing in a court far from Jerusalem, and everything feels polished enough to make you distrust it. The empire is still there with its glossy arrogance, its rich food, its perfumed halls, its officials who look like they have never once stepped in donkey dung by accident. And into that world comes a strange heavenly language about princes over nations, not kings, not governors, princes, the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Greece. That is not ordinary political talk. That is old cosmic geography peeking out from behind the curtain and pretending it belongs in the newer house. You can feel the older worldview under the floorboards. Nations are still somehow linked to heavenly beings. The map from long ago has not been burned after all. It has been folded and tucked into a drawer, and Michael appears there too. Not as a vague spiritual mascot, as your prince, your people's heavenly defender. That should sound familiar by now. It smells faintly of Deuteronomy and old allotments and that earlier world where nations were not floating around unattended. The names have changed. The staffing model has changed. The concept stubbornly refuses to die. It just puts on a cleaner tunic. Then there is the accuser. You remember him. That unnerving figure from the old council scenes, walking into the heavenly assembly, like the compliance officer nobody invited, but everybody expected. He had a job once. He tested. He challenged. He prodded. He was unpleasant, yes, but not yet the full nightmare package later generations would build. Well, time passes. His branding improves. By the later period, that old accuser has become Satan. Capital S. Not merely an adversarial function in the room, but a singular enemy with sharp edges, personal malice, and the kind of reputation that makes every shadow look like a pending problem. It is as if the legal department unionized, quit, and came back as organized cosmic sabotage. The atmosphere changes with him. Earlier, he feels like part of the court. Later, he feels like the anti-court. The old prosecutor becomes the enemy of heaven's order itself. He tempts, opposes, deceives, prowls, afflicts. He gathers baggage. Layers of fear, legend, and theological outrage pile onto him like winter blankets in a damp house. By the time you reach later Jewish and Christian imagination, he is no longer the man with a clipboard asking hard questions in the meeting. He is the meeting's ultimate hostile takeover attempt. Same figure, much worse publicist. And because one enemy is apparently not enough, the whole underworld starts filling up too. Demons become a category. Unclean spirits, wicked powers, the old divine leftovers, the dark wandering things, the rebels, the hostile presences, the things people blame when a village goes wrong and the goats start acting odd. And your cousin says he heard a voice in the ruins. The supernatural world is not simplified. It is repopulated under stricter management, then split more aggressively into loyal and rebellious camps. The result is a cosmos buzzing with activity. Messengers above, adversaries below, princes over nations, armies of light, armies of darkness. It is the old council after a corporate restructure and a very dramatic HR scandal. And nowhere does that feel more intense than among the communities waiting for the end of the age. Go out near the Dead Sea. The air is dry enough to crack your lips before breakfast. Salt sits on everything. The cliffs rise pale and severe, and the caves hold scrolls wrapped up against dust, damp, and human incompetence. The men here live with discipline sharp enough to make your average synagogue look like a relaxed family picnic. Meals are regulated. Purity is regulated. Time itself seems regulated. Even the silence feels supervised. And these people are not imagining a simple universe, not remotely. For them, the world is a battlefield already lined up for war. Sons of light against sons of darkness. Angelic hosts arranged for combat. Belial on one side, Michael and the armies of heaven on the other. Trumpets, banners, formations. Cosmic conflict rendered with the confidence of people who absolutely would label their storage jars by eschatological significance if given the chance. You can almost hear the parchment crackle as battle plans unfold. The war scroll does not give you a sleepy little heaven full of vague spirituality. It gives you ranks, divisions, warfare, heavenly allies, hostile powers, and a cosmos arranged like the most intense military parade you have ever seen. This is not the disappearance of the council. This is the council showing up in battle gear. The old structure survived. It just enlisted. And the smell in that community would not have helped the mood. Sweat under linen, dust in sandals, salt crust on skin, oil lamps, stored grain, goat hair, damp cave stone, communal meals with enough ritual seriousness to make chewing feel like a legal event. You live that close to judgment, and even your soup starts tasting apocalyptic. Then you move into the world of the early Christians, and the echoes get louder again. Paul, for instance, does not talk like the heavens have emptied out into one lonely throne and a few cherubs with spare time. He talks like the air above the nations is crowded. Principalities, powers, rulers, authorities, thrones, dominions, spiritual forces in heavenly places. That is not minimalist monotheism with no supernatural middle management. That is a packed invisible world. You can feel the old map twitching back to life under his words. He does not present the nations as spiritually neutral territory. He does not talk as if empire is merely human politics with extra paperwork. There are powers behind powers, structures behind structures. Rome may have roads, soldiers, taxes, and a frankly exhausting level of self-importance. But Paul talks as if something more is leaning through it all, something above and around, not merely flesh and blood. That language would make sense in the older council room. It still makes sense now. Only now the beings are not called gods. They are powers, authorities, rulers. The names have shifted, but the intuition remains. The nations are not spiritually empty. Human history is not happening in a vacuum. There are presences, loyalties, influences, hostilities, and ranks moving through the unseen like officials hurrying down palace corridors. Then you get to Revelation, and the old throne room swings open so hard the hinges practically scream. You are no longer in a tidy theological sketch. You are in a vision. Everything is too bright, too loud, too alive. Trumpets blast, lamps burn, creatures praise without blinking. The throne stands at the center, and around it are 24 elders seated in a ring. 24, not 0, not one lone assistant off to the side. A ring of enthroned heavenly figures surrounding the central throne, like the old council has come back wearing ceremonial white and better crowns. You know this room. You have been here before. It has been repainted, yes, intensified, turned up to apocalyptic volume. But the furniture is familiar. A central throne, attending beings, heavenly liturgy, deliberation, worship that shakes everything around it. The council chamber is not gone. It is glowing. Even the creatures are still monstrous. Eyes everywhere, wings everywhere, voices like floodwater and bronze and earthquakes having a disagreement. This is not spiritual minimalism. This is the old heavenly household refusing to die quietly. And then there are the stars. Angels of churches, angels pouring bowls, angels holding winds, angels opening abysses, angels sounding trumpets like the world's least relaxing orchestra. The heavens are crowded with personnel again. Nobody can accuse this vision of understaffing. The old divine assembly has become a fully operational cosmic government with ceremonial robes and end times special effects. And you start to realize something almost funny. People say the older divine council disappeared because later faith became more strictly monotheistic. But when you actually walk through the rooms, you keep bumping into the furniture. There is still a throne, still attendance, still ranks, still national conflict linked to heavenly beings, still heavenly deliberation, still a chief adversary, still armies on both sides. They did not demolish the house. They renovated. Some walls came down, some names changed, some rooms got repurposed. The unsettling uncle in the family portrait was relabeled regional administrator and moved to a different hallway. But the house itself stayed standing. You see it in prayer language. You see it in visions. You see it in exorcisms, where evil spirits are treated not as metaphors, but as unwelcome occupants with bad manners and zero respect for personal boundaries. You see it in stories where angels ascend and descend, where messengers stand before God, where hosts of heaven still fill the sky. The old conviction remains: reality is crowded. That idea never left. It just learned better branding. By now, if you walk back into the council chamber from the oldest stories, you would notice what changed and what didn't. The old national gods are gone by name. Their chairs have been reassigned or quietly removed. The Most High is no longer first among many in the way earlier scenes could feel. He is absolute now, singular, without peer. That much has hardened. But the room is not solitary. Never solitary. There are still watchers, still messengers, still accusers and adversaries and princes and elders and hosts, still beings standing near the throne waiting for command, still songs loud enough to shake architecture, still judgments passed from heaven to earth, still the ancient instinct that the world below mirrors a world above full of rank, conflict, praise, and terrifying administration. Like old wallpaper under fresh paint, the earlier pattern keeps showing through. You scrape at one corner and there it is, a plural where you expected singular, a prince over a nation, an adversary in the heavenly court, elders around the throne, a war in heaven, hosts standing by, the same old shapes, just under new names. And this is what makes the whole thing so strange and so beautiful. The Bible's world did not move from crowded heavens to empty heavens. It moved from crowded heavens with many gods to crowded heavens with one supreme God and an entire universe of subordinate beings, loyal and hostile alike. The cast changed categories. That is different. That matters. But the stage never stopped being full. The council survived the purge. It survived by disguise, by demotion, promotion, renaming, and reassignment, by becoming angelic where it used to be divine, by becoming demonic where it used to be rival, by becoming apocalyptic where it used to be royal, by hiding in plain sight, so you stand in the later throne room and let your eyes adjust. The names on the doors are different now. The seating chart is stricter. The central throne burns brighter than ever. But around it, the old echoes remain, patient as stone, quiet as dust in a sealed chamber, waiting for anyone willing to notice that the room was never empty after all. And from there, only one thing is left to do. Step back from the throne. Look at the whole long sweep of it, and ask what all these strange old rooms were trying to teach the people who kept rebuilding them in words. So, after all of that, after the throne room and the trial and the exile and the echoes, what was all of this trying to tell you? Because nobody keeps a set of ideas around for centuries, just for decoration. Nobody hauls these visions through war, temple ruin, empire, dust, grief, prayer, and generations of children asking awkward questions at dinner, unless those visions are doing something important. This whole strange heavenly setup was not a weird accident left in by sloppy editors. It was carrying weight, heavy weight, and once you step back from the thunder, the winged serpents, the cosmic staffing chart, and the frankly alarming number of beings whose job appears to involve yelling near a throne, the shape of it gets clearer. At first, the divine council gave people a way to talk about the world as it felt. Not simple, not tidy, not one flat stage with humans down here, and God very far away doing abstract management from a clean office in the clouds. The world felt crowded, full of forces, full of layers. Nations rose and fell. Kings swaggered. Armies marched. Crops failed. Children starved. Good people suffered while cruel people slept beautifully on expensive cushions. You needed a way to say all of that meant something, so the world above looked like the world below, only bigger. A throne, a court, ranks, assignments, responsibility, power distributed downward from a high seat. That was not embarrassment. That was explanation. It was a way of saying the universe is ordered, even when life on the ground smells like wet wool, wood smoke, and administrative failure. And that matters, because the council scenes were never there just to make heaven look busy. They were there to say power is accountable. That is the beating heart of it. When you stood in that throne room, you were not watching a group of divine beings lounging around like spoiled aristocrats at a celestial brunch. You were in a courtroom, a war room, a place where assignments were given and reviewed. Beings were expected to do their jobs. The universe was not imagined as random. It was imagined as governed, and governed beings can be judged. That is why Psalm 82 hits so hard. For all its strangeness, for all its divine weirdness, for all the shock of hearing God address other gods, the point lands somewhere painfully familiar. Those given authority failed the weak. They let injustice rot the floorboards. They did not protect the poor, the orphaned, the vulnerable, the people who always get crushed first when the powerful stop caring. So God stands up. That scene is not really about satisfying your curiosity over ancient heavenly taxonomy. It is about the horror of neglected responsibility. It is about what happens when those in charge enjoy the chair, the title, the robe, the ceremony, and then cannot be bothered to do the actual work of justice. In other words, it is ancient, and it is current enough to make you wince. The charge is not, you existed, and that was awkward. The charge is, you were given power and you used it badly. That is what makes the sentence so brutal. You will die like mortals, down you come. Not because power itself is evil, but because power without justice has forfeited its place. That is what sinks in deepest. Authority is real. Rank is real. Structure is real. But none of it gets to float above moral responsibility, like a nobleman avoiding eye contact in the marketplace while somebody hungry sits in the dust. Then you move to the division of the nations, and that part carries its own hard truth. In that older world, no land feels interchangeable. No people feel spiritually unattended. It imagined a world of nations, boundaries, inheritances, and heavenly rulers over human communities. That sounds strange to modern ears, but it gave ancient people a way to understand why the world felt fractured. Why every border seemed to come with its own gods, customs, fears, and boasts. Why history felt like a neighborhood dispute that had somehow reached cosmic scale. But even there, one thing stands out. Israel's God is not just another local deity fighting for shelf space. He claims a people personally. There is intimacy in that, nearness, commitment, messy commitment too. Because once you get attached to a people, you inherit their complaints, their disasters, their food shortages, their muttering, their golden calves, and their absolutely exhausting ability to panic in sequence. Divine election, as presented in these stories, is not glamorous. It is covenant with a people who routinely act like they need both rescue and supervision before lunch. That mattered because it told them they were not lost in the crowd. They belonged. Now the creatures around the throne, the Seraphim, Cherubim, wheels full of eyes, all those beings that look less like stained glass angels and more like somebody described a nightmare during a fever. They were teaching something too. They made sure nobody got too casual. Nobody wanders into that room sipping metaphorical tea and saying, "Well, this all seems manageable." It is not manageable. The divine world is not a neat little decorative shelf with a few tasteful figurines. It is wild, overwhelming, alive, and utterly beyond your control. The storytellers filled heaven with beings that felt excessive on purpose. Too many wings, too many eyes, too much fire, too much sound. Because God was not being presented as an enlarged human king with better lighting. He was holy, dangerously holy. The creatures taught scale. They taught distance. They taught that the unseen world is not less real because it is hard to picture. It is more real, and your imagination arrives underdressed. Then exile happens, and everything gets sharper. This is where the shift toward one God alone stops being a tidy doctrinal adjustment and starts feeling like survival talk. Your city is broken. Your temple is burned. The holy place is rubble, ash, splinters, and memories. You are far from home, surrounded by imperial swagger, foreign gods with polished temples, and officials who carry themselves like they personally invented civilization. The old arrangement could have sounded, in that moment, like defeat. Too many powers, too many nations, too many divine hands on the map. So, the answer hardens. No, justice does not belong to a patchwork committee forever. History is not finally governed by rival powers, squabbling over territory like landlords with boundary stones and bad tempers. There is one sovereign source above all of it, one authority not shaken by military conquest, one throne not burned with the temple, one God who did not lose because he was never merely competing. That is why the move towards stronger monotheism feels so fierce. It is not cowardice. It is courage. It is a people staring at ruin and saying, the world is not divided beyond repair. Justice is not trapped in the hands of lesser powers. The highest throne still stands. It does not erase the older world. It tightens it, hardens it, forces it through the fire. And even when the language changes, the older instinct keeps breathing. That is what all those echoes were doing. Angels, demons, principalities, powers, elders, hosts, adversaries, heavenly princes. All of that says, human beings never stopped sensing that visible life is not the whole thing. We have always felt in one form or another that our little patch of dirt is not sealed off. There are depths to reality, layers, presences, meaning beyond what can be counted on fingers or taxed by empire. The names shift because people change, empires change, prayers change, disaster changes the vocabulary. But the instinct remains. The world is more than it looks. And finally, when you gather the whole long story into your hands, this is what settles there. You are not holding one frozen voice speaking in a monotone from outside time. It is a long record of people wrestling their way toward understanding. Sometimes they speak one way. Later, they speak more sharply. Earlier rooms remain under later paint. Old language lingers in corners. New convictions blaze at the center. That is not failure. That is life. That is a tradition brave enough to remember where it started, honest enough to show its seams, and bold enough to say more than one thing across the centuries while still reaching for the same God. The Divine Council proves they were not afraid to picture the cosmos one way in one age, and then, under the pressure of suffering and hope, speak of it more radically in another. They changed their answers because they kept bringing the same ache back to heaven. Who governs this world? Who judges the powerful? Who sees the vulnerable? Is justice real? Will chaos have the last word? By the end of this journey, you are not left with a broken Bible. You are left with a living one. A library full of people refusing easy silence. People who looked at kings, exile, suffering, nations, angels, monsters, ruin, and the night sky itself, and kept insisting that above all the noise there is order, responsibility, judgment, and meaning. Messy on the page sometimes, absolutely, but deeply human, deeply stubborn, and somehow still coherent in the place it matters most. The highest power must be just. The vulnerable must not be forgotten. The world seen by human eyes is not the whole world. And whatever chairs have been moved, renamed, or emptied in the heavenly room, the throne at the center is where justice finally belongs. The throne room is still there. It always has been. You visit it one last time. You do not enter with trumpets this time. No shaking thresholds, no six-winged beings screaming holiness until the walls buzz like struck metal. No divine staff meeting in progress. No prosecutor strolling in with the confidence of a man who knows where the ink and the snacks are kept. Just the room. It is larger in the quiet than it ever was in the noise. The chairs are still arranged in their old circle, each one facing inward toward the center. Some are tall and severe. Some are lower, worn smooth at the arms where hands once rested. Dust has gathered in the carved grooves. Not a poetic dust either. Real dust. The dry, gritty kind that sticks to your fingertips and gets under your nails and makes every abandoned place feel faintly insulted. You reach one chair and touch the armrest. Cold, a little rough, and strangely ordinary. That is almost the weirdest part. After all the fire and thunder and heavenly bureaucracy, after the serpents and wheels and judgments and cosmic demotions, the furniture remains furniture. Seats, platforms, steps, a floor, a room built for presence, now holding mostly absence. Almost, because the center is not empty. It never was. The high place still rises above the others. No dust settles there for long. No cobweb stretches across it. The silence around that seat is different from the silence around the rest. Heavier, cleaner, the kind that makes you stand straighter before you realize you are doing it. Everything else has changed. That has not. You walk the circle slowly. This was where they stood, the sons of God, the host, the shining officials of the upper world, the assigned rulers, the ones who reported in, argued, received commands, failed catastrophically, and in at least one memorable case, got the worst performance review in the history of management. You can almost hear it still, the scrape of sandals on stone, the rustle of wings, a voice from the center asking a question no one wants to answer first. Then even that fades. The room has had a long time to settle. Empires came and went while these chairs sat in memory. Babylon strutted in with polished walls and conquest breath. Persia arrived. Greece arrived. Rome arrived with roads, taxes, and that special imperial talent for making every problem somebody else's paperwork. Kings rose, thrones cracked, languages shifted, scribes sharpened their reeds, and still somewhere above all of it, this room remained itself. Quieter now, but still there. And now we arrive at the part nobody talks about. Empty chairs are never fully empty. A chair remembers the shape of the one who sat there. A room remembers what it was built to hold. You feel that here, not like a jump scare, not like a ghost story, more like the lingering warmth in a bench after somebody has stood up and walked away. Presence has a stubborn streak. The old names have thinned with time. Some were folded into angel language. Some sank into demon language. Some were edged out, softened, translated into something safer for polite company, and easier for later readers who preferred their heavens less crowded and their theology with fewer sharp corners. Fair enough. Crowded heavens are messy. They raise awkward questions. They do not fit neatly on decorative wall art, but the room keeps its outline. You know where the circle was. You know where the throne is. You know that once, in the imagination of a people who had seen too much and still refused to stop speaking, heaven was not empty space with background music. It was a place of rank, danger, assignment, judgment, and blazing moral seriousness. That knowledge stays with you. Far below, on the earth, night settles over stone houses and courtyards and narrow streets. Oil lamps gutter. Somewhere in a temple, a singer starts a psalm in a low voice roughened by smoke and years. Somewhere else, much later, a scribe bends over a sheet and copies old words by hand, line after line, trying not to cough as dust rises from storage jars and dry leather. His lamp spits. His back hurts. The room smells like oil, wool, and old parchment with a hint of mouse. He keeps writing. One word nearly gets smoothed away. Another almost gets replaced with something less alarming. A plural gets nudged toward a singular. A divine being gets dressed in safer clothes. But not every rough edge is filed down. Not every chair is removed. Not every old word agrees to disappear. So centuries pass, and buried in caves, sealed in jars, tucked in songs, hidden in plain sight inside verses, people thought they already understood. The older world waits. Patiently, like embers under ash, like furniture under sheets in a locked house, like those family stories nobody tells for years, until one night somebody says one sentence, and suddenly the whole uncomfortable saga is back at the table. You can feel that now in this room. Not crowded, not loud, just enduring. The council chamber that was once full of movement is mostly still. The singing has stopped. The creatures have receded into memory, into symbol, into argument, into art that never quite gets their faces right. The lesser thrones sit in their circle under a thin film of silence. No one reaches for them now, but the arrangement remains. That matters, because rooms outlast explanations. Long after people forget why the chairs were set that way, the chairs are still set that way. Long after translators tidy the place up, a phrase survives with its teeth in. Long after later generations repaint the walls, the older shape shows through when the light hits it from the side. You stand there a little longer. No thunder now, no trial, no sentence falling through the air. Just the sense that the world has been stranger, fuller, and more crowded than many people were told. And also that beneath all the changes, all the edits, all the naming and renaming, the central claim endured. Above every smaller power, every failed ruler, every loud empire, every chair that could be filled and emptied, there is still the highest throne. The room holds that truth quietly. Outside, centuries keep moving. Scrolls crack, stone erodes, temples fall, languages trade places. Children learn prayers without knowing how old the furniture really is. A reader somewhere pauses over a verse and hears, for just a moment, the room behind it, and the throne room remains, long after the voices have faded and the dust has settled on every lesser seat. Still waiting, still vast, still arranged around the center. And somewhere beyond the dust, beyond the emptied chairs, it continues.